Hello and welcome back to our discussion on casting shadows in perspective views. And so far, we've been talking exclusively about natural light, typically the sun. So let's take a look at how to cast a shadow with an artificial light. What's different about an artificial light source? Well, typically the artificial light source is much closer to your subject than the sun is. All right, so we can position it precisely in our drawing. The artificial light can be in any position in the view, including below your form. All right. And your shadow point is going to be wherever the surface is, the ground plane or the table or other surface underneath the light source. It's not going to be on the horizon line. So let's walk through an example. In this scenario, we're drawing a box, all right, and it is sitting on a ground plane, and we're looking at it in 1-point perspective. In most cases, when you are trying to illustrate or render an artificial light source, you are often in an interior view, which is very commonly shown in 1-point perspective. So that's why we've switched from 2-point to 1-point perspective. So here's our box. We've got a horizon line, we've got a vanishing point, and here is our light source. And you can locate that exactly in your three-dimensional space, all right, in 1-point perspective. And so you know exactly where that light source is. The next step is to locate your shadow vanishing point. Now, when we were talking about natural light sources, that shadow vanishing point was on the horizon. That's because we assume the sun is infinitely far away from us, all right? But for artificial light sources, that's not true. And so what you need to do is find the point on the ground plane that corresponds to the location of your light source. So you'll take that location of the light source and cast it down and find the spot on the ground plane. All right. This is illustrated with a candle because it's very easy to understand. The light source is at the top of the candle. The candle is sitting on the ground plane. All right, that the same ground plane that the box is sitting on. The next steps should be familiar. You'll find your important points on your subject of your drawing and cast light rays from your light source through those important points. Next is the bearing rays. We will cast guidelines from our shadow vanishing point, and this particular illustration from this textbook calls it a VSVP. All right, that's our shadow vanishing point through the points that were projected from our important points all the way down to the ground plane. All right, those are our bearing rays. Find the intersections of the light rays and the bearing rays for each of the important points on your subject. Finally, connect the dots and you will have the outline of your shadow. In the last example, we had a candle sitting on the ground plane of our box, but it's really common to have a light suspended in an interior space or located up on a ceiling. So what do you do then? Let's walk through an example. So here we have a 1-point perspective of an interior view of the room. You can see that here is the horizon line and this red dot is the vanishing point. And we've located our light source and it's hanging right here. And we're going to assume that it is a point light source right at this yellow dot. All right. And so we're interested in this cube. Maybe it's a table, maybe it's a sofa, but right now we'll think of it as a box. All right. And it's sitting on the ground plane in the room. The first thing that you're going to do is find the shadow vanishing point. All right, and this will be the point cast directly onto the ground plane vertically from your light source. And so you need to locate that using the grid method or other perspective method to find that spot on the floor. Now, as an aside here, if we were trying to draw the shadow of an object maybe sitting on top of a table, all right, maybe there is a cup sitting on this box. The shadow vanishing point for that cup, because the cup is throwing a shadow onto the top of the box, would actually be, say, 30 inches up from the floor. All right, so it matters the ground plane of the object, what it's throwing a shadow onto. And if that's not the same as the actual floor, all right, you need to take that into account. But in our case, the box is sitting on the floor, so let's follow our typical steps. First, identify important points on your box and cast your light rays from the light source to and through and past those important points. Next step, project your important points to the ground. All right, notice that one of them is hidden back here. It's important to consider some of the parts of the object that might be hidden. All right, and you'll cast your bearing rays from our shadow point, remember that is on the ground, shadow vanishing point, through those points on the ground plane of our object. You know what to do next. You find the intersection of the light rays and the bearing rays and connect the dots to find your shadow. Finally, you can shade in your shadow, add the shade on your object, and your perspective cast shadow with an artificial light source is complete. Okay, if you made it this far, you now know all of the different methods for casting a perspective shadow. Thanks, everyone.